The Maya civilization vanished, leaving behind giant pyramids and endless questions. But a new DNA test on their true origins just produced a result so shocking, it changes human history. Scientists found a sealed chamber, 12,000 years old, holding remains with an impossible genetic code. This isn't just about a lost tribe. The crazy part is, this code is still active, and it connects the Maya to something that isn't from here. The results aren't just surprising, they're terrifying. The pre-Maya riddle. It all started in the Petén Basin of northern Guatemala. This isn't the tourist-friendly part of the jungle. This is one of the thickest, least explored, and most dangerous parts of the entire Mayan world. A research team led by experts in Mesoamerican archaeology was working on what they thought was a simple restoration program. They were scanning the foundations of collapsed temples near the massive ancient city of El Mirador.
Archaeologists have discovered a huge ancient city hidden underground in Mexico, which may give a better understanding of the Maya civilization.
A city that itself was lost to the world for centuries. They were using ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, to map the unseen foundations, hoping to find a few minor tombs or hidden rooms. Standard stuff. But then, one of the techs called the lead archaeologist over. The screen showed an anomaly. But it wasn't just an anomaly, it was a geometric void, a perfectly circular shape, buried more than 40 feet below the pyramid's foundation. So, here's the deal. Nature doesn't build in perfect circles. Not like this. The team was buzzing. At first, they thought it was just a natural cave, a cenote that the Maya had built over. That happens all the time. But the GPR signal was weird. It wasn't just an empty space. They started the dig. It was brutal work. The jungle humidity was over 90%, and temperatures soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They had to fight off insects, snakes, and the constant crushing wet heat. For weeks, they moved tons of earth and rock. Then they hit a layer of stone that was just wrong. The blocks were not the rough limestone of the Maya pyramid above. These blocks were smoother, cut with a precision that looked almost modern. They were bound together by a strange dark adhesive compound that was harder than any cement the team had ever seen. They had to use diamond-tipped drills just to get a sample, and then they found it. A sealed doorway. It wasn't an archway. It was a single massive slab of limestone 10 feet tall. Faint engravings covered its surface, but the team was baffled. These weren't Mayan glyphs. They didn't match any known script. Some shapes looked like pre-Olmec spirals, while others seemed entirely abstract, almost like star maps. The team noted their instruments were acting up again. The slab was giving off weirdly low magnetic readings, as if it had metal inside the stone. After 3 more days of careful, painstaking work, they finally breached the slab. A burst of compressed, musty air hissed out, smelling of ozone and dry dust. Inside was a circular chamber about 23 feet across, but the walls were coated in a black, glass-like substance. It looked like obsidian, but it was wrong. It absorbed the light from their lamps. It didn't reflect it. The room felt like a black hole. The air was cold, at least 20 degrees cooler than the jungle outside, and it was completely, unnaturally silent. No insects, no dripping water, no echoes. And in the center, sitting on 3 simple stone pedestals, were the ancient remains of 3 individuals. They were seated cross-legged as if in meditation. They were surrounded by priceless jade ornaments, polished metallic discs, and strange, cloudy crystal fragments. What many overlooked at first was the state of preservation. The site was pristine, untouched by decay. This should be impossible in the tropical humidity of Guatemala. Something had kept this room perfect. But the individuals themselves were the real mystery. Their skulls were elongated. Now we know the Maya and other ancient cultures practiced artificial head binding, wrapping infant skulls to change their shape. But this was different. The bone density, the suture lines, the perfect symmetry. It all suggested this wasn't artificial, this was genetic. But here's the catch. The team quickly tested organic fibers from the clothing and mats in the chamber. The carbon dating results came back, and the lab had to run them 3 times because they thought their machine was broken. The date wasn't 3,000 years old. It wasn't 5,000 years old. The results came back at approximately 12,400 years before present. Let that sink in. This chamber and the people inside it were thousands of years older than the Maya civilization. They were older than the Olmec. They were from a time before history, as we know it began in the Americas. This was the time of the Younger Dryas, a period of global cataclysm. This discovery alone would change every textbook on human history. But the thing nobody tells you is what happened when they took the remains back to the lab. They ran a DNA test, and what they found, what they unleashed, is the dark, terrifying secret this is all about. The chamber was just the beginning. The real shock was hidden in their very bones. The message in the blood. In the sterile labs, far from the mud and heat of the jungle, the geneticists got to work. The initial analysis was standard, almost boring. They sequenced the mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from the mother. The results showed the remains belonged to haplogroup A2. This is one of the 4 major haplogroups for indigenous peoples of the Americas. Nothing strange there, but that's where the normal part ended. When the team tried to run the deeper, full genome sequencing, the machines failed. They just stopped. The sequencers spat out error messages, strings of unreadable, corrupted data. They thought it was contamination. They cleaned the samples. They ran them again and again. The same result. A senior geneticist, frustrated, decided to manually analyze the corrupted segments, and what she found made her blood run cold. Specific parts of the genome, mostly in the non-coding regions, wouldn't align with any known human data. This was the part of our DNA that scientists used to call junk DNA, but we now know it's full of regulatory switches. In that junk DNA, she found it. A sequence. A repeating, patterned motif. It was so precise, so complex. It wasn't random. It wasn't a mutation. It was mathematical. When they mapped the pattern of the base pairs, it displayed a recurring ratio that perfectly, to 6 decimal places, approximated the Fibonacci progression. It was a code. This was impossible. This was a message, an algorithm hidden inside a strand of DNA from 12,400 years ago. They labeled the anomaly sequence X473. It was part human, part something else. And get this. This is where the story gets truly unsettling. This wasn't just old, dead DNA. It was active. Parallel tests at another university confirmed it. These strange patterned DNA strands emitted faint biophotonic activity. When the lab techs hit the sample with a specific frequency of ultraviolet light, the DNA glowed, a faint, eerie blue-green light. The wavelength of this light was almost identical to that produced by certain deep ocean bioluminescent animals. Why? Why would human remains from a jungle chamber contain DNA that glows? The team compared sequence X473 against every global genetic database. No match. Not to any known species, ancient or modern. It looked, for all the world, like a hybrid. It looked synthetic. And then they saw the connection. Back at the dig site, researchers were using reflective transformation imaging, or RTI, to enhance the faint images of the glyphs carved on the outside of the chamber door. The spiral patterns, the star-like formations. They sent the enhanced patterns to the genetics lab for comparison. The lab team was stunned. The micro patterns in the DNA, the geometric configurations of the base pairs that form the glowing code. They perfectly mirrored the spiral glyphs etched into the stone door. This was not a coincidence. This was design. The builders of this chamber 12,000 years ago somehow understood genetic engineering to a level we are only just beginning to grasp. They had encoded their sacred symbols, their language, into the very biology of the people inside. This is where a senior geneticist proposed a hypothesis so wild, it was immediately classified. The sequence wasn't biology at all. It was data storage. The DNA was a biological hard drive. The idea was that this junk DNA was carrying non-biological information. When they translated the anomalous segments from genetic code into binary, the data produced repeating numerical constants. These constants corresponded to precise astronomical ratios, specifically the orbital period of Venus relative to Earth, a celestial body the later Maya would become obsessed with. This chamber wasn't a tomb, it was an archive, and the people inside weren't just people, they were the books. They were living libraries carrying the astronomical secrets of the universe in their genes. The isotopic signature of the calcium in their bones was also off. It suggested they had lived in an atmosphere with a slightly higher oxygen content, conditions not seen in that region for, you guessed it, over 10,000 years. So, who were these people? An unknown branch of humanity, a lost pre-Mayan lineage. The truth, as it turns out, is even stranger. This genetic ghost, this sequence X473, didn't just belong to 3 individuals who perished 12,000 years ago. The geneticists ran one more test, a long shot. They compared the sequence to modern populations, and they got a hit. The sequence wasn't gone, it was just dormant. And the crazy part is, it's still here, walking among us, the breath of the sky. The database lit up with a low-frequency match. It wasn't a perfect match, but it was statistically impossible to be an error. It pointed to samples collected decades earlier for totally unrelated anthropological research. The samples came from a small cluster of isolated highland communities in the Yucatan Peninsula. This was the modern connection, the chilling link between the impossible past and the living, breathing present. Teams were immediately and quietly sent back to these highland settlements. These are not tourist spots. These populations live in difficult, mountainous terrain, far from major cities. They maintain ancient customs and oral traditions that have survived for centuries, long after the fall of the great Maya cities. They live as their ancestors did. The new DNA tests confirmed it. Faint, degraded, and fragmented traces of sequence X473 persisted among a small percentage of the individuals. The implications were staggering. The code was dormant, but it was present. Medically, the sequence seemed to influence cellular behavior in subtle ways. In the lab, cells containing the modern dormant version of X473 showed accelerated tissue repair and unusually high memory-related neural activity. These people, for generations, had shown an inexplicably high immunity to certain infections that had ravaged other nearby communities. But the cultural connection was the real bombshell. Anthropologists, now part of the team, began interviewing the village elders. They heard strange, repeated phrases. The elders spoke of being guardians of the old blood. Their oral histories, passed down for hundreds of generations, warned against intermarriage with outsiders, not for reasons of prejudice or tribalism, but as they said, to prevent a loss of balance. They were, unknowingly, preserving a genetic distinction. They were protecting sequence. When the researchers, on a hunch, showed the elders the enhanced images of the spiral glyphs from the 12,000-year-old chamber, several of them recognized it immediately. They grew quiet, and through a translator, they called it the breath of the sky. They said it was a symbol of the first ancestors, the ones who came from the stars during the Great Shaking and the Long Cold. This wasn't just a story, it was a genetic memory, passed down from a time before the Maya, before the pyramids, from the frozen depths of the last ice age. But the mystery of where this DNA came from was only getting deeper. As the geneticists looked at broader data, they found microfragments of it everywhere, tiny trace amounts in South Pacific Islanders, in northern Andean populations, and even in certain isolated Arctic groups. The sequence didn't have a common ancestor. Phylogenetic models which traced genetic evolution couldn't find its origin. It didn't evolve from anything. It just appeared. It looked, for all the world, like an insert, an intentional addition, a piece of code sporadically inserted into human populations all over the globe. Populations separated by thousands of miles of ocean and thousands of years of time. The picture was becoming clear, and it was terrifying. The DNA, the ancient individuals, the living descendants, they were all part of a single, massive global system. But what was the other part of that system? The DNA was the software. Where was the hardware? A pulse from below. While the geneticists were chasing ghosts in the blood, the remote sensing teams back in Guatemala found something else. A second anomaly. Much, much bigger. Beneath the jungle canopy, hidden under layers of ancient volcanic ash and limestone, was a perfect, symmetrical ring. It was massive, measuring roughly 300 feet across. This was no sinkhole. This was a structure. Core samples were extracted. What they found should not exist. The ring was made of alloy materials, including titanium, vanadium, and iridium. These are metals that require incredibly high temperatures, thousands of degrees, to process and shape. The surrounding volcanic glass was fused with metallic particles, evidence of exposure to temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. No pre-industrial society could do this. No prehistoric culture had this technology. This wasn't a temple. This was a piece of advanced machinery. But here's the kicker. The thing was humming. Magnetotelluric readings, which measure electrical resistivity in the deep earth, revealed the ring was emitting low-frequency electromagnetic pulses. They were faint, but they were regular. A stable pulse repeating every 11 minutes like clockwork. The team was baffled. What was this machine? An astronomical instrument? An energy source? The initial readings suggested it wasn't just on the ground. It went deep, deeper than their equipment could penetrate. This wasn't just a machine. It was a beacon. They decided to map the pulse pattern. They converted the electromagnetic frequency into a numerical ratio, and they nearly fell over. The pulse pattern from the 300-foot metallic ring perfectly matched the mathematical ratio of sequence X473. The machine and the DNA were connected. Let that sink in. A piece of buried, impossible technology was actively communicating with a unique, glowing genetic sequence found in 12,000-year-old remains and still present in the local guardians of the old blood. They were two parts of the same system resonating at the same frequency. This structure was, in effect, talking to that special DNA. This is when the theories went from lost civilization to something else entirely. What if the machine wasn't talking to the DNA, but powering it? Or what if the people were the power source? A living biological battery network designed to keep this ancient machine on standby? Or maybe the most terrifying theory of all, what if the ring wasn't sending a message, but an instruction? A command written in electromagnetism telling that special DNA to do something, to change, to activate. This is when they went back to the other artifacts from the first chamber, specifically a fractured jade tablet. The glyphs on it were finally translated using the new context. It was a star map, but it didn't show the sky from today. It showed the night sky from exactly 12,000 years ago. That date should send a shiver down your spine. 12,000 years. It's the exact time frame of the Younger Dryas. The moment a global cataclysm, maybe a comet impact, maybe a solar flare, reset human civilization and plunged the world into a final, harsh ice age. The map pointed to the Pleiades, a star cluster the Maya were obsessed with. No surprise there. For centuries, that's what everyone focused on. It was the perfect misdirection. The real secret, the one hidden in plain sight, was what the map pointed to next. It also pointed to a second location. A spiral path connected our solar system to a dense region of interstellar dust within the Taurus constellation, an area about 1,500 light-years away. This wasn't a star, it was a void, a dark patch. The tablet called this spot Chian Hall, or the Sky River. The team realized Chian Hall wasn't a destination, it was a corridor, a superhighway through the cosmos, a stable wormhole, a back door to our solar system. The tablet referenced this spot in conjunction with symbols for arrival, teaching, and blood. And the timing, that's what should send a shiver down your spine. The tablet's text, what little they could read, spoke of the Bakab Chan, those who came in light, the Sky People. They didn't just visit, they arrived. And they arrived 12,000 years ago, just as the world was ending in fire and ice. The Younger Dryas Cataclysm, a moment when global civilization was being wiped clean, reset to zero. Think about that. A planet-wide disaster, humanity on the brink of extinction, and that's when these beings decide to show up. Coincidence? Not a chance. Now, put the pieces together. The Sky People arrived 12,000 years ago in the middle of a global apocalypse. They come not from Taurus, but through Taurus using the Sky River. They find a planet on the brink of total collapse. The fires are raging, the ice is advancing. They can't save the world. It's too late for that. But maybe they can save a piece of it. What if they weren't just teachers? What if the legends of them giving knowledge were just a simplified version of the truth? What if they were genetic engineers? They find a broken species, terrified survivors huddling in caves, their DNA degrading. They see an opportunity, a blank slate, They intervened. They built this massive 300-foot machine, this beacon, this genetic trigger, and buried it deep beneath the earth, far from the chaos on the surface. They needed it to be safe. They needed it to last. Then, they did the unthinkable. They edited the DNA of the survivors. They didn't just heal them, they changed them. They inserted sequence X473, a genetic signature, an alarm clock, a piece of alien code that would be passed down from parent to child, hidden in our junk DNA, for millennia. They created a bloodline to act as living custodians for a technology they couldn't take with them. A system left dormant, humming on low power for 12 millennia, waiting. They didn't need guards. They didn't need a priesthood. They turned an entire lineage into a biological key, a living antenna perfectly tuned to the machine they buried. Waiting for what? Their return, or waiting for the day the descendants of those survivors, us, were finally ready for the truth? Or maybe it was a failsafe, waiting for the day we became advanced enough to find the machine, or the day we became advanced enough to be a threat. The thing is, people watching this are looking for a mystery, and the mystery just got bigger. Did all this happen overnight? Is this real? Are we missing a key detail? We've been so busy looking at the stone tablets, we forgot to listen to the machine itself. What most people don't realize is the pulse from that ring, the one that repeats every 11 minutes. That signal isn't just a simple ping, it's a heartbeat. And in the last 6 months, it's been getting stronger. It's not just getting louder. The scientists on site are reporting that the signal is becoming more complex. The frequency is shifting. It's no longer a simple beacon. It's starting to look less like a pulse and more like a transmission. It's not just saying, "I'm here." It's starting to say, "It's time." What do you think? Is this ancient code a gift from our creators, or is it a terrifying warning? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more secrets we aren't supposed to know.